Liam never thought of himself as a failure. He just secretly believed he was late. Late to success, late to love, late to confidence, late to everything that seemed to arrive on time for everyone else. He lived in a small apartment outside Austin, Texas, worked a regular office job, paid his bills, called his parents on Sundays, grabbed coffee with coworkers, and yet almost every night he'd lay in bed, staring at the ceiling with one heavy thought in his chest. Everyone else is already ahead of me. It always started the same way. He would open his phone and see college friends buying homes, announcing engagements, launching businesses, posting pictures of vacations in places he couldn't even afford to Google. Some of them had kids. Some of them had job titles he didn't even understand. Some of them were on under 30 lists. And every new post felt like another reminder that his life was moving at the wrong speed. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't irresponsible, but comparison made him forget every obstacle he had quietly survived, every setback he had quietly climbed out of. All he could see were the highlights of other people's timelines and the gaps in his own. It hurt most during family gatherings. His relatives would ask the same questions. So, when are you buying a house? Any wedding plans? Have you thought about starting something of your own? They weren't cruel questions, but they landed like small punches because Liam was already asking himself harsher versions of them in his head. On bad days, he would replay every decision he had made in his 20s, wondering where he went wrong, as if life were some train schedule and he had missed the only departure that mattered. One Friday night, after a long week, he met his old friend Marcus, who had just moved to the city. Marcus arrived with a calm smile, driving an older car, wearing simple clothes, no watch that screamed success, no story about killing it in life. Over dinner, Liam confessed, half laughing and half breaking, that he felt like everyone else was ahead of him. Marriage, money, career, stability, everything. Marcus listened quietly and then asked, "Ahead of you based on which clock?" The question annoyed Liam for a moment. What do you mean, which clock? Everyone's doing it earlier. But Marcus kept going. He reminded Liam of people like Colonel Sanders, who started building KFC in his 60s after a lifetime of failures, and Vera Wang, who didn't design her first wedding dress until she was 40. He talked about a woman he knew in their hometown who went back to college at 45 and started a new career that made her happier than anything she did in her 20s. They weren't late, Marcus said. They were just on a different schedule than the one the world worships. That night, Liam went home, and for the first time, instead of asking, "Why am I behind?" he asked, "Who decided the deadline for my life?" He thought about the times he had to work part-time jobs through college, the months he helped his dad through a health scare, the years he spent just trying to feel emotionally okay again after a bad breakup. None of those things showed up on a resume, on a post, on a bragging story at reunions. But they were still part of his journey, part of why his path looked different. He realized he had been ignoring the weight he had been carrying while comparing his pace to people who never had to lift the same loads. The next morning, he made a quiet decision. He would stop treating his life like it was running late. He turned off push notifications from social media and stopped scrolling first thing in the morning. He started writing instead, 3 lines a day about what he was grateful for and 1 line about what he was building toward, no matter how small that step was. At first, it felt like nothing was changing. The world was still loud. Success was still loud. Other people's timelines were still loud, but slowly something inside him began to soften. He found himself genuinely happy when good things happened to people around him, because their wins no longer felt like proof of his failure. He took a course after work to upskill, not because he was desperate to catch up, but because it genuinely excited him. He started running in the evenings, not to impress anyone, but because he liked feeling his body get stronger as his mind grew quieter. Months passed, and while his life still didn't look like a highlight reel, it began to feel like his. He got a promotion, not a headline-worthy one, but one that recognized the quiet consistency he had shown for years. He made a few new friends who weren't obsessed with status, who liked slow walks and honest conversations more than posting about them. One evening, he saw a social media post from an old classmate showing off an expensive house and a luxury car. For a second, the old feeling rose, the tightness in the chest, the whisper that said, "See, still behind." But this time, something different happened. Another voice inside him answered, "Behind what? Behind who? You are building a life that fits you, not a race that was never yours. He put the phone down and went for a run under the Texas sky. And instead of counting what he didn't have, he counted what had grown inside him. Patience, resilience, self-respect, and a kind of quiet confidence that didn't need an audience. He finally understood that life isn't a competition where everyone starts at the same line with the same shoes and the same weather. Some people run on smooth tracks, some run uphill with weights on their shoulders, and some start their real race at 40 or 50 or later. The idea of being too late started to feel absurd. Too late for what? For living? For learning? For changing? For becoming who he was meant to be? A few days later, he watched a short video about people who found success later in life. Morgan Freeman landing his breakthrough role in his 50s, Colonel Sanders building KFC after so many failures in his 60s, and a woman who published her first book at 62 and slowly found readers around the world. None of them looked rushed or ashamed of their age. They spoke with the calm of people who had lived enough to know that the clock on the wall is not the clock of the soul. These weren't miracles, he realized. They were just human beings who refused to believe there is an expiration date on growth. From then on, whenever the old fear whispered, "You're behind," he answered it softly, sometimes in his car, sometimes in his kitchen. "I'm not behind, I'm becoming." It sounded almost silly at first, but each time he said it, his shoulders relaxed a little more. He stopped waiting for a perfect year to start and picked up one small dream at a time. A weekend project, a skill, a side idea, and treated them not as proof that he was catching up, but as gifts that made his present richer. One Sunday night, as the city lights flickered in the distance and anxiety tried to convince him that Monday would expose how far behind he really was, he smiled and thought, "If my life doesn't look like yours, that doesn't make mine wrong. It just makes it mine." And for the first time, the idea of time itself felt less like a judge and more like a quiet partner, walking beside him instead of running ahead of him with a clock and a whistle.